Hey everybody, Eric Brown, MOBO-Media, MOBO-Media. Hey, I want to talk to y'all about something that I came across probably within the last 2 years, man. It's a concept that I'm blanking on her name, and I hate that I'm blanking on her name right now. I got a lot going on in my head. Um, but there is a concept out there, or I don't want to call it a concept. It is to me, it's a factual thing that happens, and that is something called post-traumatic slave syndrome, PTSS. If any of y'all just Google it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. And what this is that it talks about the trauma that slaves went through back then, and the fact that when slavery was abolished, no one reached out and gave the slaves counseling to try to help with some of the trauma they had endured. The federal government sure as hell didn't do anything about it. Basically, they were just you're free. That's it. No money, no nothing. Just you're free. Yeah, you went through all this and went through all that, whatever. But the lady, her name is Dr. Joyce DeGruy, I think. Joyce DeGruy, I think is her name. And she actually has a book out, PTSS, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. But the thing that struck me was how she broke it down to even the simplest things, man. You cannot imagine how it carried over into today. And two things I want to touch on. One is like the Bible says, I believe the Bible says, spare the rod. I don't know what I'm talking about. Um, Whipping children, that sort of thing, giving them spankings and hell, some of us beatings. And she talked about a lot of that stemmed back from the slavery days because back in Africa where we came from, you didn't find that stuff. People inflicting harm on each other, children like that. But it became ingrained in us to inflict harm on each other. And people laugh and joke about being whipped with extension cords and hell 2x4s and switches and all that type of stuff. But if you look deeper and deeper into it, there's likely some truth to what she's saying. I mean, it post-traumatic slave syndrome. These beatings and whippings came from what was done to the slaves back then. Because before slavery, you didn't have all that. People beating on each other and stuff like that. And I know some people will question that and say that no, that's false information, you're wrong. But do your homework and do your history. I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about in general. That wasn't the norm. It wasn't the norm until they brought the slaves to the U.S. and started beating the hell out of us. And nowadays, a lot of that's gone. It's been it's been addressed now because people realize the harm inflicted on children when you lay your hands on them, things like that. But don't get me wrong, I'm not. I'm kind of divided on it because I still believe that I do believe certain situations require certain levels of punishment. Let me just put it to you like that. I don't believe in inflicting irreparable harm to a child. I do believe in making some adjustments, if y'all know what I'm talking about. Okay. Another thing that she touched on, and this is one that really blew my mind. She talked about how, you know, oftentimes we as a people have become accustomed to talking down to our own, particularly our children. And she told a story back in the day of how, you know, those slave masters back then, they would sell off families, split up families like animals, man. Yeah, they didn't care if the husband, wife, and kids, they split them up depending on the amount of work they could do. Well, she talked about how when children got old enough to work out in the fields, then the masters would come out there and try to get the child and put them to work just like the adults. So what the mothers would do was they would denigrate the child. They would say, "Oh no, master, no, he's stupid, he's ignorant, yada 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 yada." You know what I'm saying? But they didn't do it out of to hurt the child. They did it to protect the child. They did it to protect the child. They did what they had to do. But in protecting the child, they were inflicting harm and damage to the child. And it was the craziest thing. And I can see a mother trying to protect their child in that way. Particularly when the slave owner is considering selling the child off to some other plantation. The mother would step up and do everything she could to let the master know with it. My boy ain't no good. He ain't no good. He ain't no good to you. Lazy, blah, blah, blah. But they did it to keep the family together, stop the master from selling the child off. This is fact. Y'all read up on it. PTSS. So, yeah, post traumatic slave syndrome is something that really blew me away. And with my background in the mental health, behavioral health, psych, whatever, it intrigued me. And I was like, wow, it was like a light bulb moment that came on for me. But yeah, just something I wanted to share. But I encourage everybody to Google PTSS, Dr. Joy DeGruy, post traumatic slave syndrome. And just read it. Just I'm not saying agree with what she's saying. This is a smart lady. She's done her research. And so just kind of read what she has to say. Please read what she has to say. This is Eric Brown again, MOBO-Media. Y'all take care. Bye bye.